Peacemaker season 2 is here after like what, 3 years, because Hollywood can't make annual seasons anymore for their TV shows. They make us wait multiple years, and then we don't remember what the freak happened in the in the last season. Because this is just where we're at, I guess. I don't know. I know that there are good reasons for it. I don't really care. Make TV shows the way that you used to. What, you think you Breaking Bad used to come out every year? What, you think your show's better than Breaking Bad? Don't think so. Anyways, I'm not going to get into that whole rant. This is definitely one of the more interesting projects, I would say, because James Gunn, he being a little bit of a selfish bastard, ain't he? He decided, I know I'm making a new universe, and it would probably make more sense for me to just start off fresh with completely new characters, completely new franchises. But he was like, I like working on Peacemaker. So we're just going to continue on with Peacemaker Season 2, and we're just going to say that it's a part of the DCU. That, of course, very confusing to a lot of people, because Peacemaker Season 1 was a direct spin-off of The Suicide Squad, which was very much a DCEU movie. Peacemaker Season 1, very much a DCEU show. So how exactly is this going to work where Peacemaker Season 2 is set in the DCU, is very much a continuation of Superman? How exactly is all of that going to work? And I'm going to be honest, I actually think they did a really solid job of explaining it all. I won't spoil it, but pretty much immediately they address it. And I think they do it in a pretty reasonable and easy to understand way. I was actually legitimately impressed by how quickly I went, okay, yeah, sure, that makes sense. So I'm not going to spoil how they go about explaining it, but this is the way that I am understanding canonicity within the DCU. Okay. The DCU have characters in it that are played by the same actors that played those characters in the DCEU. Peacemaker is an example of them. Amanda Waller is an example of that. Those are two good examples. Now, the Peacemaker of the DCU is not the same Peacemaker of the DCEU. They are two completely separate characters. However, these two characters, they are separate characters, but these two characters have similar histories. So, Peacemaker in both the DCEU and in the DCU killed Rick Flag Jr. That is a canon event, if we're going to use Spider-Verse terms. And so, that thing that happened in the Suicide Squad is carrying over into the DCU. However, that does not mean that everything else that happened in the Suicide Squad is also canon to the DCU. Because as far as the rules are concerned, James Gunn has kind of explained this, and it really clicked with me when I saw the beginning of Peacemaker Season 2. Basically, you cannot assume that anything in the DCEU happened unless it gets brought up and addressed in a DCU project, right? So we know that that Peacemaker killed Rick Flag Jr. That's the only thing from the Suicide Squad that we can really consider as canon, right? Was Harley Quinn and Ratcatcher 2 and Bloodsport, were those characters involved in the mission where the DCU Peacemaker killed Rick Flag Jr.? Not necessarily. That's never been addressed or brought up in any DCU project. So we can't take any of that as a fact, right? As far as we know, the Harley Quinn of the DCU hasn't even been created yet, right? Like, her relationship with the Joker, as far as we know, hasn't even happened yet. None of that has been decided. So does that make sense, right? And like, to be clear, this is not a new concept, right? I think a good example of this is Spider-Man. The Andrew Garfield Spider-Man and the Tobey Maguire Spider-Man both had their Uncle Bens die. That does not mean that they are the same Spider-Man. They have similar histories. They have similar, things that happen, but they're not the same character. And just because something happened in the Tobey Maguire movies does not mean that it's canon in the Andrew Garfield movies. That's basically the logic that we're going with. I feel like I get it. I feel like Peacemaker Season 2, Episode 1 makes that fairly clear. That being said, I don't know that other, just a normal person who's watching the Peacemaker show is going to necessarily get that. I definitely do see a reality where a lot of people are confused. But yeah, anyways, I feel like that's the main question that a lot of people are going to end up having. That's my explanation of it. Maybe I'm right, maybe I'm wrong. Now, beyond all the canonicity stuff, is the show good? Yeah, I think it is more of Peacemaker. It's more of what I like. It's interesting that this is a continuation from Superman. This is very much the next step of the DCU, because this is a James Gunny R-rated show where, whereas Superman I feel like was a more confined James Gunn, definitely had James Gunn elements in there, but Peacemaker is where he's letting it all loose, where you got swearing, you got gratuitous violence, you got John Cena in his underwear. And I personally find all of that stuff entertaining. You might think it's cringy, you might not like James Gunn's humor. And yeah, I mean that is very much what this is. But I will say I like the way that they're exploring the characters. Pretty much every character is kind of, they're exploring their psyche, they're exploring where they're at emotionally after the events of Peacemaker Season 1, which again is Peacemaker Season 1. Most of that seems to be canon. I do think most of that is canon. So, and actually, just to step back to the canonicity conversation, you can still watch Suicide Squad. You can still watch Peacemaker Season 1, and you can carry that emotionality that you get from those experiences into the DCU, right? Into Peacemaker Season 2. And I guess just to use another example, The Batman. That movie is kind of relying on you, having watched Batman Begins, taking in the emotionality that you feel from the death of the Waynes, and you carry that into the Batman, right? The Batman doesn't show you Bruce Wayne's parents dying, but they're banking on the fact that you've seen Batman Begins and you can kind of think back to your emotions from that experience and just carry it into the Batman. So again, a lot of the stuff with the DCU, it's not necessarily new. Literally the only difference is that they have the same actors playing these different versions of the characters. Anyway, what was I even saying? I low-key forgot. But yeah, overall, I very much enjoyed the first episode. Enjoy the humor. Action is good so far. There's one very flashy sequence where I'm like, okay, this is fun. I like the choreography. I like all the the comic booky action. This is entertaining. There is one other action sequence which is kind of just more grounded, where it's in a bar and it's just brawling. But even then, that action is good as well, because it has narrative depth to it. So overall, I like it. It is a solid start. I will say it seems like it's a little predictable. I feel like I know where this season is going, where it's okay, you're kind of laying out what the arcs of all the characters are going to be. But we'll see. It might go in different directions. But overall, I enjoy it. If you liked Season 1, you will definitely like this. If you didn't like Season 1, I don't necessarily know that this season is going to do anything to get you on board. And actually, another thing that I should bring up, which I guess I already kind of addressed this, but yeah, if you have a child that you took to see Superman, no, they should not watch this. And I do think that is just an interesting direction that James Gunn is taking his DCU in, where, yeah, not every one of these projects is going to be for everybody. In fact, right now we have 3 DCU projects. We have Creature Commandos, Superman, Peacemaker Season 2. 2 out of the 3 DCU projects are not kid-friendly. That's interesting. Doesn't necessarily seem like the smartest way to go about things. But I also think that he's so far doing a decent enough job of, you don't really need to have watched, like you don't need to have watched Creature Commandos in order to understand what's happening in Superman. I doubt that you're going to need to have seen Peacemaker Season 2 in order to understand future projects. At least I hope not. Don't make that same mistake that Marvel made. So yeah, basically, just to wrap up my spoiler-free thoughts, if you like Peacemaker Season 1, you'll like this one. As far as the canonicity, it addresses it. It addresses DCU canon. I think it does it in a decently understandable way. You can let me know how you feel about it, though. All right, let's get into a more spoilery discussion of the first episode. So yeah, they basically reveal that within the canon of the DCU, the Justice Gang arrived at the end of Season 1, as opposed to the DCEU Justice League. You can see on the left-hand side, we have Mr. Terrific. I'm assuming that would be David Cornsweet, Superman, that shows up. Guy Gardner, Hawk Girl. And that looks like Supergirl on the right-hand side. Instead of Aquaman and the Flash having their little interaction, it's actually Hawk Girl and Guy Gardner. So, again, it goes back to my example with Uncle Ben in the Tobey Maguire Spider-Man movies and in the Andrew Garfield Spider-Man movies. Similar events, but they don't happen exactly the same way. And so, honestly, I'm totally fine with that explanation, right? James Gunn is going to cherry pick and choose what he wants to bring over from the DCEU and how it's all going to work. And basically, if we follow the rule of nothing in the DCEU is canon unless it's openly addressed in a DCEU movie, honestly, I think that's perfectly understandable. So yeah, let me know what you think about all of that. Now, we also got a new intro. Dance sequence or whatever. It's fine. I mean, look, it's not. You're never gonna like one up the intro from the first season, mostly just because of the shock of the intro from the first season. Right? We didn't see it coming, and so it was this new wacky thing. They have a new one in this one, and it's a new dance intro. Again, it's totally fine, but you're never gonna one up the surprise of it from the first season. We got the scene from the trailer where Peacemaker gets rejected by the Justice Gang. So this is basically setting up where Peacemaker is at in this season. He is, by and large, still just kind of a loser when it comes to being a superhero. Even though he saved the world, it doesn't necessarily change how people see him. Harcourt is also down on her luck because after the events of the last season, we see Amanda Waller basically blacklisting her from every government agency. So she basically can't find a job. We see that she can't pay her bills, and so she is not handling things the best way, of course. They end up teasing a budding romance between Peacemaker and Harcourt, so you assume that that's probably going to go somewhere. I mean, I think they're cute. I'd like to see them, get together, but we'll see where that goes. But Peacemaker, very much into her. Harcourt, when you see the scene where he's like tying the ice around her knuckles, I think she's into him, but I think she's just like putting up a wall because that's just her personality. So I assume we're going to see Peacemaker penetrate the wall, the metaphorical wall. Maybe we'll see him penetrate something else. We'll see. And yeah, this is just another example of this just being an interesting project to follow up Superman with. We got an orgy scene. We got Peacemaker being I guess, bisexual. yeah, it's just interesting that the follow up to Superman includes an orgy scene. And we're going to see how this all goes because at the end of the day, I think it'll be fine for the DCU to have a variety of projects, a variety of tones. But it really does need to be made clear, and there cannot be any confusion. It needs to be made clear that you do not need to see everything in order to understand the projects that you do watch within the DCU. Because that is, of course, a problem that Marvel has, where it's like, well, I didn't watch Falcon and the Winter Soldier, so am I really going to understand Thunderbolts? Or, well, I didn't watch WandaVision, am I really going to understand Doctor Strange too? That is, I think, a problem that the MCU has. I think thus far it hasn't been a problem with the DCU. Like, I don't think there was anybody going, I didn't watch Creature Commandos. I don't know if I'm going to be able to understand Superman. Like, I don't think anybody thought that. So I think they're doing a decent job of it. Honestly, I think the best way that they can maintain this is you probably shouldn't have your TV characters have super prominent roles in movies. I feel like that's probably the way to go about it. And I say that unfortunately because, you know, we saw in Thunderbolts that you had TV characters in, you know, John Walker being prominent roles or playing prominent roles in the movie. You know, Yelena, even though she was in Black Widow, she was also in Hawkeye. So you got to wonder, like, did people see those TV characters in Thunderbolts and think that they had to watch a bunch of TV shows in order to understand it? Is that partly to blame for the box office, right? Like, you know, I hate to say it, but if you have that Lanterns show and then that parlays into, you know, Jon Stewart being in some kind of movie, are there going to be people that don't go and see that movie because they think that they need to have watched Lanterns? I don't know. I think that is something to consider, right? But anyways, we also get the reveal that Rick Flag Sr., who is played by Frank Grillo, who I will say he does have a through line here, right? He was in Creature Commandos and he was in Superman, and he's now in Peacemaker season 2. The through line is that he's mourning the death of his son, and he's now going after Peacemaker because Peacemaker killed his son. And so I will say, like, the way that actually Rick Flag is a good example of how these things should be handled, right? Where he was in Creature Commandos and then he was in Superman, but he wasn't like a major character in Superman. And if you had seen Creature Commandos, then I do think that his appearance in Superman, that does add value to that, right? Where it's like, oh, it's the guy from Creature Commandos. And you know what? It actually makes sense that he would be more amenable to metahumans because he worked with metahumans in Creature Commandos. So it would make sense that he's a little more sympathetic towards Superman. But if you didn't watch Creature Commandos, well then, you know, Rick Flag is just another government guy. And you're not necessarily losing out on too much. So yeah, I mean, so far, I think they're doing a good job of having this larger interconnected universe, but also having each project be relatively standalone. So I think so far they're actually doing a pretty good job of all of that. So the other big thing about this first episode is that they introduced the concept of the multiverse again. Very interesting situation where we got another dimension with his brother who's alive and his dad who, well, he might still be racist, but he's at least nice to his son. Yeah, it's very interesting that after I feel like a lot of people have unanimously just been kind of sick of the multiverse when it comes to Marvel, James Gunn is like, we're doing it here right from the get-go. We're not even building up to it like Marvel did. It's multiverse time, guys. But, I mean, I will say, at least in this instance, it's being done for narrative effect, right? It's being used as a way to showcase Peacemaker not feeling satisfied with his own life and, you know, in an unhealthy manner, we assume that he's gonna try to make his life. He's gonna try to be in or like move into this new universe, even though that's not really his reality. That's not really his dad. That's not really his brother. And I assume that this season is gonna be about him confronting, those feelings and stuff in a literal manner. Because I assume he's gonna clash with his brother and his dad because he killed their literal brother and son. We also see Harcourt not dealing with with her feelings and healthy behaviors. She's very much seeking danger. She's very much like seeking death because that's really the only thing that she knows how to do. So again, I assume we're gonna see Harcourt get better over the course of the season. One thing I actually really liked was Economos being a bro. He was like, "Hey man, I don't want to rat out my dog. I don't want to rat out Peacemaker," which I thought was kind of neat. Economos, I feel like, he's always kind of like an apathetic character to some extent. He's not necessarily like the most noble of characters, so I kind of liked seeing him do that. I totally forgot to, Adebayo. They also explained that I think what did they explain? Her girlfriend left her because she decided to reveal everything about Argus or something. I would say that is one thing that they maybe could have explained better. I don't know if they just couldn't get that character back for this season. The actress who played her girlfriend. I don't know. I feel like they could have actually shown us that instead of just having Adebayo explain it. But we'll see where they take that. But yeah, the episode ends with Peacemaker killing his variant, and we assume that he is then going to, I mean, just based off the trailers, where we assume that he's going to try to just sort of move into that new universe where he has his dream life. But yeah, overall, solid start to the season. Let me know what you think in the comments down below, and I'll see you in the next video. Goodbye.